The California sun shone mercilessly through the thin curtains, illuminating the small room that had become my sanctuary over the past 3 years. I ran my hand over the faded bedspread, the only thing I'd managed to keep from my home with Chester. The fabric held thousands of memories. Our evenings in front of the fireplace, when he'd read aloud to me, our coffee mornings on the porch, our plans for a future that was never meant to be. My name is Evie Packard, 67 years old, and I live in a house that no longer belongs to me, though every corner of it was made by my hands. The clock on my bedside table read 7:30, half an hour earlier than I usually got up, but sleep had long since left me. I could already hear footsteps and muffled voices downstairs. Nora always gets up early, says she needs time to herself before the house fills up with extra people. By extra people, she means me. I carefully slid my feet off the bed, careful not to disturb the creaky floorboards. My daily ritual, waking up early to use the bathroom before Nora started her morning routine. The last time I broke this routine ended with a week of silence and notes about the need to respect privacy on the refrigerator. Slipping into the bathroom, I quickly washed my face with cold water. The mirror reflected a tired face with deep wrinkles around my eyes. Not so much signs of age as of the last few years of my life. After Chester's death, it was as if I'd aged a decade. My Chester, my safe haven, had left 5 years ago, leaving me alone in the raging ocean of life. "Mom, are you up yet?" Lawrence's voice came from behind the door. "Yes, dear. I'm almost done," I replied, hurriedly gathering my few toiletries. "Nora would like to get ready for work." I could hear the apologetic note in his voice that always came through when he spoke on his wife's behalf. I opened the door, coming face to face with my son. Lawrence, once an energetic and determined boy, now looked like a faded copy of his old self. At 42, his dark hair was thinning and his eyes were permanently troubled. He worked as an accountant for a construction company, a steady but unfulfilling job. "Sure," I smiled. "I was just about to go downstairs and make breakfast." "Don't worry," Lawrence avoided my gaze. "Nora has already made a smoothie. She says traditional breakfasts are too heavy." "For who?" I wanted to ask, but I kept silent. My son had long ago stopped being the kind of person who would stand up for his mother. Ever since Nora Wolfe came into his life 10 years ago, it was as if he'd dissolved into her, lost his own core. In the kitchen, Nora was methodically slicing fruit for her famous smoothie. Tall, slender, with perfectly styled blonde hair, she always looked like she'd just stepped off the pages of a glossy magazine. In her 38 years, she worked as a coordinator in a travel agency, organizing trips for wealthy clients. "Good morning, Nora," I said. She looked up from the cutting board, nodded briefly, and went back to her work. "You're up too early, Evie. I bet the neighbor's dogs kept you up again, didn't they?" Her words sounded concerned, but her tone betrayed irritation. "Just woke up," I replied, heading for the coffee maker. "I wouldn't recommend coffee at your age," Nora continued without looking up. "Blood pressure, you know." "My blood pressure's fine," I objected softly, pulling my mug out of the cupboard. "The doctor said 1 cup a day was acceptable." Nora pressed her lips together, but didn't say anything. Lawrence stomped awkwardly to the refrigerator, as if he didn't know which side to take. "We're going to be late today," he said at last. "Nora has a client meeting, and I have to finish my quarterly report." "I'll make dinner," I suggested, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Maybe I'll make that tuna casserole you liked when you were a kid." "Actually," Nora interjected, "we agreed to meet the Brambles at the seaside. Do you remember the Brambles, Lawrence? Zane's been promoted, and they want to celebrate." Lawrence nodded, avoiding my gaze. "Yes, of course. Sorry, Mom. Maybe some other time." I smiled and nodded, taking a sip of coffee. The bitterness of the drink harmonized surprisingly with the bitterness rising inside me. This was the third other time in the last 2 weeks. Once upon a time, Chester and I's evenings were filled with laughter and conversation. We discussed everything from politics to gardening. Our home, the same home I now felt like an unwelcome guest in, was a place that always smelled like freshly baked bread and coffee. Chester was a plumber, not the most glamorous profession, but he took pride in his work and in helping people. "Evie," he used to say, "there's nothing more important than making the lives of others a little better." He built our house with his own hands. Every corner was created with love and care. When we had Lawrence, our only child, We were over the moon. Chester dreamed that his son would follow in his footsteps, but Lawrence was always drawn to numbers and calculations. We supported his choice, happy that he had found his path. In college, he met Nora, a bright, ambitious girl from a wealthier family. She saw potential in him that perhaps he didn't see himself. Their marriage was no surprise, though Chester often told me privately that he worried about how Nora seemed to be reshaping Lawrence to her standards. "Mom, would you mind checking the mail today?" Lawrence's voice brought me back to reality. "There should be a notice from the bank." "Sure," I replied, returning the empty mug to the sink. "And if you can, don't touch the flowers in the yard," Nora added, stirring her smoothie. "I hired a gardener to come on Wednesday." I nodded silently. The flowers I'd planted 25 years ago were now considered Nora's property, like everything else in this house. When Chester got sick, we didn't realize the seriousness of the situation. The pancreatic cancer was discovered at a late stage, and it all happened so quickly that I barely had time to realize I was losing him. In his last days in the hospital, he would squeeze my hand and talk about a future that would never come for the two of us. "Evie, my girl," he whispered, "you're going to be okay. I've arranged everything." I didn't pay much attention to his words at the time, writing them off as medication and pain. After his death, I found myself devastated not only emotionally, but financially as well. Medical bills ate up most of our savings. Lawrence offered to sell the house and move in with him and Nora, but I couldn't part with a place that held so many memories. In the end, we came to a compromise that now seems to me a catastrophic mistake. I signed the house over to Lawrence on the condition that I would live there for the rest of my life. He promised that nothing would change, that it was just a formality to protect my interests. Everything changed. At first it was little things, rearranging furniture, changing curtains, new appliances. Then Nora decided that my bedroom on the first floor would be the perfect office, and I was moved to the second floor, to a small room that used to be used as a guest room. My stuff was slowly disappearing. Some was going to the garage, some was accidentally thrown away during cleaning. "We're leaving." Nora put her glass in the dishwasher. "Don't forget to set the alarm if you decide to go out." Lawrence waved awkwardly at me, following his wife toward the exit. "I'll see you tonight, Mom. Don't expect us for dinner." The door slammed shut and the house fell into silence. I stood in the middle of the kitchen I'd designed myself years ago and felt like a stranger. Stepping out into the yard, I examined my flowers, sickly and neglected, despite Nora's promises about a gardener. My roses, of which Chester and I were so proud, were withering without proper care. "I know, sweetheart," I whispered, looking up at the sky. "This isn't what you dreamed of for me." I spent the rest of the day flipping through old photo albums that had miraculously escaped Nora's purge. Chester at our wedding, young, sparkling, eyed, little Lawrence on his first bike, our trip to Yellowstone when Lawrence was 10. The family dinner, captured in one of the last photos, was taken a year before Nora came along. Lawrence laughed at his father's joke. I watched them lovingly. We were happy then, whole. In the evening, I made myself a simple dinner, scrambled eggs with vegetables and toast, eating alone at the kitchen table, trying not to notice how little of Chester and I were left in this house. The phone rang as I was doing the dishes. "Evie, it's Robin." My old friend's familiar voice sounded warm and concerned. "How are you?" Robin Thorne had been my best friend since high school. Now she was working as a real estate lawyer in San Diego, and I didn't see her as often as I'd like. "Same old," I replied, wiping my hands with a kitchen towel. "What do you mean, awful?" I could hear the smile in Robin's voice, but also concern. "Well, not terrible," I tried to sound optimistic. It's just that you're living in your own house like a poor relative," Robin finished for me. "Evie, how much longer is this going to go on?" I sighed, not knowing what to say. It was a question I asked myself every day. "You know you can move in with me," Robin continued. "I have plenty of room, and Howard would love it. He still says your cherry pie's the best he's ever tasted." I smiled, remembering Robin's husband, the kind, somewhat bumbling literature professor. "Thanks, but, this is still my house, you know? Every corner of this place reminds me of Chester. A home that's no longer yours legally, Robin reminded her gently. Look, I don't mean to be pushy, but this is getting worse. You deserve better than to be a prisoner in your own home. We talked some more, reminiscing about old times and promising to meet up soon. When I hung up the phone, I felt a little better. Robin had always had that gift of giving me back my faith in myself. I went up to my room and pulled out a small box from under my bed, the only place Nora had kept her nose out of. Inside were Chester's letters, my wedding ring, too expensive to wear every day, in Nora's opinion, and a few papers. One of them caught my eye. The envelope Chester had handed me the week before he died. Keep it safe, Evie, he said then. Don't open it until you really need it. I haven't opened it in all these years. True to my promise. Maybe now is the time. I twirled the envelope in my hands, but something stopped me. Not today, not yet. As I fell asleep in my narrow bed, I thought about Chester, about our life, about how things had changed. My life had become a quiet, waiting for something I couldn't define for myself. A patient existence on the periphery of my own son's life. I arranged everything, Chester whispered in my memories. What did he mean by that? And why do I feel like I'm about to find out the answer to that question? The morning was unusually hot, even for Huntington Beach. I woke up from the heat, opened the window, and let in the salty breeze from the ocean. The smell reminded me of the times Chester and I had walked along the beach, holding hands and dreaming of the future. A future that turned out to be nothing like I'd imagined. There were voices downstairs. Nora was on the phone, her harsh tone echoing throughout the house. I glanced at my watch. 8:15. She and Lawrence usually left for work at that time. As I walked down to the kitchen, I saw my sister, in-law, gesticulating furiously with the phone to her ear. She was wearing an impeccable white suit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. No, that's not possible, she cut him off. I'm not going to reschedule because of someone else's incompetence. When she saw me, Nora's expression changed instantly, her irritation even more obvious. I have to go, she said into the phone. Have this problem solved by the time I get there. She hung up and turned to me. Did you want something, Evie? Good morning, Nora. I tried to smile. I just came down for coffee. Aren't you working today? I have a meeting at 10, she glanced at her watch. And Lawrence is working from home today. He's in his office and asked not to be disturbed. I nodded, heading for the coffee machine. Lawrence had been working from home more and more often over the past few months, but somehow I hardly saw him. It was like he was hiding from me in his office, my former bedroom. Actually, Nora put her cup in the sink, I wanted to talk to you. Lawrence and I have our anniversary in 3 weeks, and we're planning a little renovation. Renovations? I asked, pouring the coffee. What kind of renovations? Nothing major, she waved her hand. We just want to freshen up the second floor. New wallpaper, maybe some rearranging. I froze with the cup in my hand. The second floor. There was only my room and the guest room they used as a storage room. You want to redecorate my room? Not just yours, Nora smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. The whole wing. But yes, you'll have to move in temporarily. Maybe you could visit your friend? The lawyer. Robin, I corrected myself. How long are you planning on renovating? 2, 3 weeks. A month tops. A month. A month away from the house where every corner held memories of Chester. I took a sip of coffee, trying to hide my anxiety. I'll think about it, I finally answered. When do you plan to start? Next Monday. Nora picked up the bag. Don't worry, we'll pack your things. And by the way, Lawrence said you wanted a new cell phone? Did something happen to the old one? My phone was an old model that Lawrence gave me 3 years ago. It worked fine, and I never asked for a new one. No, my phone is fine, I answered, surprised. That's odd, Nora frowned. He said you were complaining. Well, never mind. I have to go. Remember to set off the alarm if you go out. She walked away, leaving me confused. Lawrence had never lied to me before. At least that's what I thought. After breakfast, I decided to check the mail. Among the advertising brochures and bills was an envelope from the bank. I opened it. Inside was a monthly notice about the status of my savings account, which was receiving my pension. Looking at the statement, I frowned. The amount was less than it should have been. Significantly less. I pulled the previous statement out of my dresser drawer, where I kept all my important papers, and compared the numbers. The difference was almost $1,000. The money had been withdrawn in 5 separate installments. My heart beat faster. I'd never withdrawn that much money, much less made 5 separate transactions. The only people with access to my account were me and Lawrence, whom I'd added as a trustee after Chester's death. I pulled out the previous month's statements. Same pattern, small but regular withdrawals that I hadn't made. In total, nearly $5,000 had disappeared from my account in the last 6 months. There was a knock on the door of my room. I hastily tucked the statements under my pillow. "Come in." Lawrence looked in, an uncertain smile on his face. "Hi, Mom. Nora said you were up already." "A long time ago," I answered, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Are you working from home today?" "Yeah, I have a few projects to finish up." He shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. "Did Nora tell you about the remodeling?" I nodded. "Lawrence, I need to talk to you." "About the bank statements." His face changed. A slight panic flashed in his eyes. "Bank statements? Is something wrong?" "I've noticed some strange withdrawals," I said, watching his reaction. "Money I hadn't withdrawn." Lawrence ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd always done when he was nervous, ever since he was a kid. "Oh, that," he smiled strained. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that. You see, we've had some unforeseen expenses. The air conditioner broke down, had to be fixed right away. And then the roof started leaking." "Lawrence," I interrupted, "why didn't you tell me? It's my money." "I know, Mom," he looked down. "I just didn't want to bother you. We were going to pay it all back next month. Nora's expecting a bonus at work." I looked at my son, the man I seemed to have known all my life, but who was becoming stranger by the day. Where is the boy who cried when he accidentally broke my favorite vase and honestly confessed without trying to hide his guilt? Where is that young man with his principles and open heart? "You should have asked," I said quietly. "It's not a question of money, but of trust." Lawrence swallowed. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know what I did was wrong. I swear we'll get it all back." "When?" I asked. "How much more did you take without my knowledge?" He hesitated, and that was answer enough. "Lawrence, I'm your mother. I've always supported you, always been there for you. If you need money, why not just ask for it?" "It wasn't really for us," he answered quietly. "Nora's brother was in trouble. He needed money right away, and we decided to help." "Nora's brother?" I frowned. "The one who lives in Las Vegas? The one who'd already had 2 gambling problems?" Lawrence nodded without looking up. "He promised he'd pay it all back this time. He has a good job, just temporary difficulties." I sighed. Nora's brother, Finch Wolf, was known for his temporary difficulties that somehow stretched on for years. "And you needed a new cell phone for that?" I asked. Nora said you told her as if I needed a new phone." Lawrence turned pale. That's different. I just thought you'd be more comfortable with the new model. More features, better communication." "Lawrence," I looked him straight in the eye. "Don't lie to me, please." He looked away. "I have work to do, Mom. We'll talk about this later, okay?" Without waiting for an answer, he walked out, closing the door tightly behind him. I was left alone, trying to make sense of what had happened. My son was stealing money from me. Probably not just money, but something else, judging by his reaction to the question about the phone. What else were they hiding? Deciding to take a walk to clear my head, I went downstairs. As I passed Lawrence's office, my former bedroom, I heard his muffled voice. He was on the phone. "No, she recognized it," he was saying. "Notice the withdrawals." "Yes, I know I should have been more careful." "No, I didn't tell her about the other thing. Of course, we'll continue with the repairs." "Yes, I understand." I froze, unable to move. "The other thing." What did that mean? What else were they hiding from me? Carefully, trying not to make any noise, I stepped out of the house. It was a cloudless day and the sun was scorching, but even its heat couldn't compare to the burning sense of betrayal that spilled inside me. I walked down familiar streets, past the houses where the families Chester and I had been friends with for years lived. Many were gone. Some had moved away, some had left after Chester. New people, new faces, strangers. Walking into a small park nearby, I sat on a bench in the shade of an old oak tree. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Robin's number. "Hi, honey," her voice sounded cheerful. "How are you today?" Not so good, I answered honestly. Lawrence and Nora seemed to be taking money out of my account without asking. There was a pause. How much? Robin finally asked, her tone changing from that of a lawyer to that of a friend. Almost 5,000 in the last 6 months. And I guess there's something else I don't know. Evie, Robin said slowly, you need to check all your paperwork. All of them. Especially the ones that have to do with Chester's house and insurance. And if possible, do it without them noticing. Do you think they could? I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence. I don't know, Robin sighed. But it's better to be sure. And Evie, if you need a place to stay, my offer still stands. They're planning renovations, I said. They want me to go away for a month. That's perfect, Robin sounded determined. Come to my place and bring all the important documents, every single one of them. I want to see them. We talked some more, going over the details of my possible visit. When I hung up the phone, I felt anxious. But there was something else. Determination. It was time to stop turning a blind eye to what was happening. When I got home, I found that Lawrence had gone somewhere else. The perfect opportunity to look around without being seen. I started by checking my room to see if all my important documents were in place. Chester's life insurance policy, our marriage and Lawrence's birth certificates, the deeds to the house. Pushing up the mattress, I pulled out the flat box where I kept my most valuable papers. I opened it and froze. There was no policy. There was no deed to the house to prove I owned it for the rest of my life. All that was left was our wedding photo, a few personal letters, and a mysterious envelope from Chester that I never opened. My heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. I sat down on the bed, clutching the envelope in my trembling hands. Keep this, Evie. Don't open it until you really need it. Chester's words echoed in my memory. Now. Now really needed. With trembling fingers, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several sheets of paper and a small key. I unfolded the first sheet. It was a letter, written in Chester's familiar handwriting. My dear Evie, if you're reading this, it means my fears have been confirmed and you've had a difficult time since I left. I'm sorry I can't be there to protect you as I promised on our wedding day. I was always worried about what might happen if something happened to me, especially after Nora came into Lawrence's life. Don't get me wrong. I wanted to believe the best, but I saw things that maybe you didn't. So I took precautions. In this envelope, you'll find the deed to a property in Santa Barbara, a small house on the coast. I bought it 20 years ago as an investment and put it in your name. Lawrence doesn't know about it. No one does. Also, here is the key to the safety deposit box at the First National Bank of Huntington Beach. In the box, you will find the originals of all important documents, including your will and insurance policy, as well as access to an account that only you and I know about. Evie, my love, I hope you never have to use it. I hope Lawrence will take care of you as I taught him, but if not, you have an escape route. You are not alone and will never be alone as long as you carry me in your heart. Love forever yours, Chester. Tears flowed down my cheeks, dripping onto the paper. Chester, my kind, caring, thoughtful Chester. Even from the grave, he tried to protect me. I looked through the rest of the papers. Indeed, among them was a certificate of ownership for a small house in Santa Barbara, in my name. The date of purchase was 20 years ago, when Lawrence was still in college. How did Chester keep this from me? And why? I've seen things you probably haven't. That phrase kept bugging me. What exactly had he seen? What had caused him to prepare so thoroughly for the worst? Another document caught my eye, a statement from an account I'd never heard of. There was almost $100,000 in it, a fortune I hadn't realized I had all these years. The little key to the safety deposit box gleamed in my palm like a symbol of hope. I had a choice, a way out. Chester had taken care of it. I heard the front door slam. Lawrence had returned. Quickly tucking my papers and key into the pocket of my robe, I wiped away my tears and tried to clean myself up. There was a knock at the door. Mom, are you home? Yes, I answered, trying to make my voice sound normal. I'm here. The door opened, and Lawrence stepped into the room. He was holding a package from the local bakery. I brought your favorite cinnamon rolls, he said with a guilty smile. I wanted to apologize for this morning's conversation. I looked at my son, the man I loved more than life, the man I trusted unconditionally, the man who might have betrayed me. Thank you. I took the package, trying not to show my true feelings. That's very sweet of you. Mom, he sat down next to me on the bed. I'm really sorry about the money. We'll pay it all back, I promise. I nodded, unable to say a word. In the pocket of my robe was proof that Chester didn't trust his own son, and now I was beginning to understand why. Were you crying? Lawrence frowned, noticing my reddened eyes. I was just remembering Daddy. It was true, though not entirely. Lawrence put his arms around me, and for a moment I felt as if I were holding the little boy I'd once tucked into bed with stories. My little boy that I think I've lost. Nora and I want you to be happy, he said, pulling away. Everything we do is for the common good. I remembered the words of Chester's letter. I've seen things that maybe you haven't. Now I was beginning to see it too. The true face of my son and his wife, hidden behind a mask of concern. I know, I lied, smiling through unshed tears. I know, darling. When he left, I pulled out my phone and texted Robin, I'll be there. Monday, and you were right. I need to check all the paperwork. Then I reread Chester's letter again. You have an escape route. Now I really did have a choice, and for the first time in a long time, I felt not only the pain of betrayal, but something else, a quiet but firm resolve. The small key in my palm seemed to promise a new beginning, a beginning that Chester had taken care of, as if anticipating everything that would happen. Monday morning was unexpectedly chilly. Heavy clouds covered the Huntington Beach sky, and even the California sun couldn't shine through. I stood at the window, watching the first raindrops crash against the glass, a rare occurrence around here, especially this time of year. My small suitcase was already packed and at the door. I was getting ready to leave for Robin. I'd spent the 3 days since I'd discovered Chester's letter in a strange daze, mechanically doing the usual things and furtively gathering the most important things. I carried my papers and the key to the safe deposit box with me at all times, afraid to leave them unattended even for a moment. Lawrence and Nora did not seem to notice my condition. They were absorbed in preparing for the repairs that were to begin today. The workmen were scheduled for 11 in the morning, and I was to leave at 10. At least that was the plan. A knock on the door snapped me out of my musings. Mom, are you ready? Lawrence's voice sounded unusually tense. Yes, almost, I answered, moving away from the window. I just had to get my toiletries together. Lawrence came in uninvited. His face was pale and his eyes were running, avoiding my gaze. I checked the weather forecast, he said, rubbing his hands together nervously. They're predicting a storm. Maybe you should postpone the trip. Robin's waiting for me, I shook my head. Besides, the workers are on their way, aren't they? Yeah, but... He hesitated. I'm just worried. It's going to be wet, and you haven't driven in these conditions in a long time. I'll call a cab, I assured him. Don't worry. Lawrence nodded, but he didn't leave. He stood in the doorway, as if hesitant to say anything. Anything else? I asked, starting to gather my makeup into a small purse. Nora wanted to talk to you before you left, he said finally. She's waiting in the kitchen. I froze. Nora had never sought my company, much less to talk to me. About what? I don't know. Lawrence shrugged, but his nervousness was even more noticeable. Probably wants to make sure you're all right for the trip. When I went down to the kitchen, I found Nora at her laptop. She was fully dressed despite the early hour and looked like she was going to an important meeting. Evie, she closed the laptop when she saw me. Have a seat. I sat down across from her, feeling the tension rising between us. Lawrence said you wanted to talk to me. Nora nodded. Her usually immaculate hair looked a little disheveled today, and her face showed an uncharacteristic restlessness. Yes, it's about the repairs, she tapped her fingers on the table. There have been some complications. What kind of complications? I asked, feeling the anxiety building up inside me. The construction company changed the timeline, Nora said quickly, not looking me in the eye. They can only start work in 2 weeks. We thought maybe you should stay. Something in her tone made me wary. Why was she trying so hard to keep me in the house when she'd been pushing me out the door just a few days ago? I've already made arrangements with Robin, I said. She's expecting me tonight. But you don't need that right now. Nora tried to smile, but it was a strained smile. Why bother your friend if the repairs are delayed? At that moment, Lawrence entered the kitchen. His hands were empty. Not my suitcase or my bag. Mom, I think Nora's right, he said, standing beside his wife. You should stay. I shifted my gaze from my son to my daughter-in-law, trying to figure out what was going on. What's wrong? I asked bluntly. Why do you suddenly want me to stay so badly? They looked at each other, and I could read more in that brief exchange of looks than in any words. Nothing's wrong, Nora said, pulling herself together. We're just worried about you. The weather's terrible, and the road will be dangerous. I appreciate your concern, I said slowly, standing up. But I'm going. Robin's waiting for me. I headed for the stairs, but Lawrence blocked my path. Mom, please. His voice trembled. Stay. Just for a couple days. What's going on, Lawrence? I looked him straight in the eye. Tell me the truth. He looked away, and that little detail told me everything I needed to know. I'll make sure I've packed everything, I said, stepping around him. The cab would be here in half an hour. When I went up to my room, I found that neither my suitcase nor my packed bag was there. I searched the whole room. The things were gone. My heart raced faster. What were they up to? Why did they take my things? Going downstairs, I found Lawrence and Nora in the living room. They were standing close together, talking quietly. When they saw me, they stopped talking. Where are my things? I asked, trying to remain calm. Mom, Lawrence stepped toward me. We need to talk. A serious talk. I asked where my things were, I repeated, feeling anger building up inside, an emotion I rarely allowed myself. Evie, Nora intervened. Please sit down. It's important. I remained standing with my arms crossed over my chest. I got a call from the bank, Lawrence began. They said someone was trying to access my account information. What does that have to do with me? I asked, even though I already knew where he was going with this. They said the request was made from your phone. Lawrence looked genuinely upset. Mom, why would you want to check my accounts? I felt the ground go from under my feet. It was a lie. I had never tried to access my son's accounts. I never did. I didn't, I said firmly. You know that very well. The bank has records, Nora interjected. Your cell phone, your IP address. Everything points to you. That's impossible, I shook my head. Someone is lying, either you or the bank. Mom, Lawrence stepped closer. You haven't been yourself these past few months, forgetting things, mixing up days. Maybe you just don't remember. I don't have dementia, if that's what you're implying, I replied sharply. And I know for a fact that I didn't try to hack into your accounts. But you know what I found out? That there's money missing from my account. Money that was taken by you. Lawrence turned pale, but Nora remained remarkably calm. We borrowed some to help my brother, she said. Lawrence had already explained it. We were going to pay it back. And what else did you borrow? I felt a wave of anger rising inside. My deed to the house? Chester's insurance policy? Now Nora was pale too. What are you talking about? You know what I'm talking about, I stepped forward. I want my stuff back. Now. My suitcase too. There was a long pause. Then Nora straightened up, and her face took on the cold expression I knew so well. Lawrence, she turned to her husband, tell her. My son looked as if he were about to vomit. Mom, he began, stammering. Nora and I think that you need help. Professional help. What? I couldn't believe my ears. You're showing clear signs of paranoia, Evie, Nora said coldly. Wait a son, you're accusing us of stealing documents you probably put somewhere and forgot about. You're trying to gain unauthorized access to Lawrence's accounts. You keep forgetting things, mixing up the days. I'm not confusing anything, I interrupted, feeling a lump in my throat. And I know for a fact that I haven't touched Lawrence's accounts. Mom, Lawrence took another step toward me, holding out his hand. We've already talked to Dr. Mitchell. He's agreed to take you in for a checkup. Dr. Mitchell, the psychiatrist Nora took her mother to before she put her in a nursing home 5 years ago. You're trying to declare me crazy. I said it not as a question, but as a statement. I want to gain control of my money and property. See? Nora turned to Lawrence. Paranoia, classic case. I'm not going to any doctor, I said firmly. And I won't let you steal what's mine." "Steal?" Nora laughed. "You see, Lawrence, she thinks we are thieves." "Don't you dare laugh at me." My voice shook with anger. "I know what you're doing. I know you stole money from my account. I know you want to get rid of me." "That's enough," Lawrence suddenly shouted, his face contorted with rage. "I will not allow you to insult my wife. We have tried to be patient. We have tried to help you, but you make it impossible. I've never seen my son like this. Even as a teenager, when Chester and I told him not to do something, he never raised his voice at us." "Impatient?" I grinned bitterly. "You stole my money, hid my documents, and now you're trying to lock me up in a mental institution? And you call that patience?" "Get out!" Nora suddenly shouted, pointing at the door. "Get out of our house!" "Nora!" Lawrence tried to calm her down, but she pushed his hand away. "No, Lawrence, I can't stand it any longer. She accuses us of stealing, of conspiring against her. If she doesn't want treatment, let her get out." Lawrence looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I never expected to see, a cold determination. "Ah, Mom." His voice was calm but firm. "You have to leave." "What?" I couldn't believe my ears. "You have to leave," he repeated. "Now. You're kicking me out?" I looked from my son to my daughter-in-law. "From my own home?" "It's our house," Nora cut him off. "It's in Lawrence's name. You are a guest here, and you are no longer welcome." "Lawrence," I turned to my son, ignoring Nora, "is this what you really want? To throw your own mother out on the street?" He was silent, avoiding my gaze. "Remember how Daddy built this house. Remember how we lived here. This is our home, Lawrence. Our family." "Not anymore." His voice was quiet but firm. "This is my home now, and my family is Nora." I felt something inside me finally shatter. The son I'd raised, the one I loved with all my heart, was choosing this woman over me, throwing me out of his life like I was nothing. "Okay," I straightened, trying to keep my dignity. "I'll leave. But first I want my things back." "Your things are already outside." Nora smiled with undisguised pleasure. "We've made preparations for your departure." I walked out onto the porch and saw my suitcase piled by the trash cans. Several bags of clothes and personal belongings were lying nearby. Everything was wet from the rain, which by then was pouring down like a bucket. "You threw my stuff away?" I turned to Lawrence and Nora standing in the doorway. "Like trash?" "You can take them if you want," Nora shrugged. "Or leave them. We don't really care." I stared at my son, trying to find a bit of the boy I knew in his eyes, but there was nothing there but emptiness. "You're doing the wrong thing, Lawrence," I said quietly, "and one day you will realize it." "Go away, Mom," he said, looking away. "Just go." The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in the pouring rain, next to the trash cans where my belongings, the remnants of my life, were lying around. I stood motionless, letting the rain mix with the tears on my face. Shock, pain, anger, all these feelings tangled into a tight knot inside. I couldn't believe this had happened, that my own son had thrown me out of the house like unwanted junk. Through the shroud of rain, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Prentice, peering out the window of her house across the street. She quickly pulled back the curtain, noticing my gaze. Shame burned me. The whole neighborhood would now know what had happened. I walked over to my belongings, trying to see what could be salvaged. The suitcase was half open, its contents soaked through. Bags of clothes were lying in the dirt. Chester's picture frame was broken, shards of glass glistening in the puddle. Carefully, I pulled the picture out of the broken frame and tucked it under my jacket to keep it out of the rain. Then I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket, luckily I had it on me, and dialed Robin's number. "Evie," her voice sounded concerned. "Are you on your way?" "Robin," I tried to speak calmly, but my voice was trembling. "They kicked me out. They threw my stuff out on the street. Yeah, I don't know what to do." "Oh my God," Robin breathed out. "Where are you now?" "At the house, outside in the rain." "Don't move," she said firmly. "I'll call you a cab right away and I'll call the police." "No, don't call the police," I replied quickly. "Just help me get out of here." After a short conversation, I put the phone away and looked around. The rain continued to pour, drenching me to the skin. I looked at the house I'd lived in most of my life, the house Chester had built, the house where Lawrence was born and raised. Now I was a stranger here. Through the sound of the rain, I heard the front door open. Lawrence came out onto the porch with a small bag in his hands. "Mom," he walked over to me, holding out the bag. "Your medication and some papers." "Yeah, I didn't mean for things to go down like this." I silently took the bag without looking at him. "Nora isn't as bad as you think she is," he continued. "She just cares about our family, about our future." "You don't have a future, Lawrence," I replied quietly. "Not with a woman who makes you throw your mother out on the street." He flinched as if struck by a blow. "It was a mutual decision," he said after a pause. "We can't go on live like this." "Like what?" I finally looked at him. "With a mother who loves you? With the woman who gave you everything?" Lawrence averted his eyes. "I have to go. Nora's waiting." He turned to leave, but I stopped him by grabbing his arm. "Remember this moment, Lawrence," I said, looking into his eyes. "Remember what you did, because I will never forget it." He snatched his hand away and walked quickly toward the house without looking back. I stood in the rain, clutching my bag of medication and papers, feeling the determination growing slowly but inexorably inside. Determination mixed with anger. Anger I'd never felt before. I pulled out my phone and dialed again. Not Robin this time. "First National Bank of Huntington Beach. How may I help you?" A pleasant female voice answered. "Hello." I tried to speak clearly, despite the tremor in my voice. "My name is Evie Packard. I have a safe deposit box in your bank. I'd like to access it today." "Of course, Mrs. Packard. You'll need to come to the bank with a key and identification." "I'll be there in an hour," I answered and hung up. In the distance, a cab appeared in the distance, approaching slowly down the rain-soaked street. I took one last look at the house where I had been happy and where I had been betrayed. A strange calm came over me, displacing the pain and resentment. Chester had taken care of me. I had a plan. I had a way out. A cab pulled up beside me. "Mrs. Packard?" the driver asked, rolling down the window. "Robin Thorne sent me. Where can I take you?" I smiled, feeling the strange calm turn to determination. "To the First National Bank of Huntington Beach," I said, climbing into the car. "And then on to San Diego to see Robin Thorne." Sitting in the warm cab, looking at my former home through the wet glass, I pulled out my phone and texted a quick message to Robin. "I'm fine. Heading to the bank, then to your place. Chester took care of everything. Time for justice." Robin's house greeted me with a warmth and comfort I hadn't felt in a long time. After the freezing rain that had soaked me to the skin and the emotional turmoil, this warmth seemed almost unreal. Robin immediately led me to the bathroom, gave me dry clothes, and only then, when I changed and recovered a little, sat me down in the kitchen with a cup of hot tea. "Evie, I still couldn't believe Lawrence did that." Robin shook her head, sitting across from me. "Throwing his own mother out on the street. It's just unthinkable." I wrapped my chilled fingers around the cup, soaking up its warmth. The shiver that had been gripping me since I'd been thrown out of the house was slowly subsiding. "I couldn't believe it either," I answered quietly. I'd hoped until the last minute that he'd come to his senses. "Nora," Robin said the name with undisguised contempt. "It was her doing. She's always wanted to get rid of you." "Perhaps," I took a sip of my tea, "but Lawrence made the decision. My son chose this woman over his own mother." Robin reached across the table and squeezed my palm. "You said Chester left you some papers? Something that might make a difference?" I nodded and pulled a stack of papers out of the bag I'd managed to get from the bank before going to San Diego. His letter was about a property in Santa Barbara, a house in my name, and a bank account I knew nothing about. Robin, a professional real estate lawyer, carefully took the papers and began to study them. Her face grew more and more surprised as she read. "Evie," she finally said, "this isn't just a house. This is luxury real estate in one of Santa Barbara's most expensive neighborhoods. According to these documents, Chester bought it over 20 years ago. How could he hide a purchase like that?" I shook my head, perplexed. We always discussed everything, especially finances. It says here that the house was purchased through a trust. Robin turned the page. Very clever move. Chester set up the trust in your name, but he managed it himself until his death. After he died, the trust automatically passed to you. Lawrence didn't know anything about it because the trust was set up before his majority and never mentioned in the main will. Why did Chester make it so complicated? I asked, even though I was beginning to realize the answer. Robin looked up from the documents. He was protecting you, Evie, from his own son, or rather his wife. Look, she pointed to the date on the document. This trust was set up shortly after Lawrence and Nora's wedding. Chester must have noticed something that made him take action. I remembered how Chester had always been alert around Nora, how he watched her closely when she couldn't see. He'd always been a perceptive man, sensing people better than I did. What else is in the paperwork? I asked, pushing the bitter thoughts away. Robin continued to study the papers. Here are the account statements. Evie, there's almost $300,000 in this account. I almost dropped my cup. What? Where did that come from? Apparently, Chester had been making small deposits into this account for years. Robin flipped through the statements. Plus interest over the years. And also, she paused, scrutinizing one of the documents. It said that part of Chester's life insurance went into this account too. Not all of it, just part of it. But I got the life insurance payments after he died, I countered. They helped pay the medical bills. What you got was only part of the policy, Robin explained. The bulk of it, according to these documents, went into a secret account. I leaned back in my chair, trying to make sense of the information. Chester, my practical, trustworthy Chester, had been secretly building a financial safety cushion for me all these years. He had foreseen that there might be trouble with Lawrence and Nora and had prepared himself. That's not all, Robin continued. There's a copy of the original agreement on the Huntington Beach house. The one I signed when I signed over the house to Lawrence. I stepped forward. Yes, Robin scrutinized the document. Evie, under this agreement, you have the right to live in the house for life. Lawrence had no right to kick you out. That's a direct violation of the legal agreement. I felt anger rising inside me. Not fierce and burning, but cold and determined. And what does that mean legally? Robin set the paperwork aside and looked at me with a smile of professional confidence. It means we can sue Lawrence and Nora for breach of contract, wrongful eviction, and, if we can prove it, for financial fraud on your account. Can we prove it? I asked. Do you have statements showing withdrawals? Robin went into lawyer mode. I nodded and pulled another folder out of my bag. Here, I saved all the statements for the last year. Robin looked through them quickly and whistled. Almost $8,000 for the year, all in small amounts so as not to arouse suspicion. It's a classic scheme. We can request videotapes from the bank showing who withdrew the money. She put the statements aside and picked up the phone. I'll call a colleague of mine who specializes in family law. We're going to need his advice. While Robin talked, I got up and walked to the window. The rain in San Diego wasn't as heavy as in Huntington Beach, but it still created a gray pall through which the city seemed blurry and indistinct. Like my life over the past few years, blurry, indistinct, as if I were looking at it through a cloudy glass. But now the fog was lifting. Thanks to Chester and his foresight, I had a chance not just to survive, but to get justice. Robin ended the conversation and turned to me. Good news. My colleague Weber can meet with us tomorrow morning. He's the best in the county on domestic financial fraud cases. Thank you, Robin, I said sincerely. I don't know what I'd do without you. The same thing you're doing now, she smiled. Fighting. You've always been a fighter, Evie. You just forgot about it for a while. Her words made me wonder, was I really a fighter? Or just a woman who'd let others decide for me for too long, turned a blind eye for too long? You know, I said slowly, all those years after Chester died, I felt helpless. Like a part of me died with him. I'd let Lawrence and Nora control my life, gradually pushing me aside, turning me into a shadow in my own home. You were in mourning, Robin replied softly. It's natural to feel lost after such a loss. It wasn't just that, I shook my head. I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid of losing Lawrence too. So I kept silent when I should have spoken, gave in when I should have stood my ground. And yet Chester knew that one day you'd find your strength. Robin pointed to the papers. Otherwise, he wouldn't have prepared all this. I smiled, feeling my eyes fill with tears. Not with grief this time, but with gratitude. He'd always believed in me more than I believed in myself. Robin stood up and hugged me. Well, it was time to prove him right. The next morning we met with Alistair Weber, a family law attorney, at his office in downtown San Diego. Weber was a short, gray-haired man with shrewd eyes and a calm manner of speech that immediately inspired confidence. Mrs. Packard, he shook my hand. I'm sorry to hear about your situation. Unfortunately, cases of financial abuse in the home are more common than most people realize, especially against elderly parents. Financial abuse? I asked, not quite used to that wording. That's exactly what it's called, Weber nodded. Misusing your money, trying to control your finances, depriving you of access to your own assets, all of these are forms of financial abuse. He scrutinized the documents Robin and I had brought, making notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. Well, he finally said, setting aside his pen, we have a few courses of action. First, a suit for breach of the life tenancy agreement. This is the most obvious and perhaps the strongest argument. Second, financial abuse. Withdrawals from your account without your consent. Third, unlawful eviction. They had no right to treat your belongings this way. What do we need to do? I asked. Hunnam. First, we send a formal letter notifying them of the breach of agreement and demanding damages, Weber replied. This gives them a chance to rectify the situation before the court. If they ignore or refuse, we file a lawsuit. And the house in Santa Barbara? Robin asked. And the secret account? They're fully protected, Weber assured her. The trust your husband set up is legally impeccable. Neither Lawrence nor his wife has anything to do with it. In fact, Mrs. Packard, you're quite a wealthy woman, even without the Huntington Beach house. That thought was new to me. All these years after Chester's death, I had thought of myself as financially dependent on my son, living on a modest pension and small savings. And it turns out I have a house in Santa Barbara and a sizable bank account. What about the accusations that I tried to access Lawrence's accounts? I asked. It's a lie, but how can we prove it? Weber thought for a moment. We can ask the bank for details of these alleged attempts, the exact time, the method of access, the IP address. If, as you say, you didn't do it, we can probably prove that you couldn't have physically done it at the time in question. For example, if the attempt was made while you were at the store or doctor's office. Sure, they could have used my phone while I was asleep, I suggested. Then we'll ask for the phone's location at the time. Weber nodded. Modern technology leaves a lot of traces. We spent several hours discussing strategy and gathering additional information for the lawsuit. Weber was meticulous and methodical, leaving no detail untouched. By the end of the meeting, we had a clear plan of action. I will prepare the formal letter today, Weber said as we walked out. It will be delivered tomorrow. I'll also initiate inquiries to the bank about suspicious activity in your account. And, Mrs. Packard, he looked at me seriously, I recommend that you visit the house in Santa Barbara as soon as possible. Make sure it's in good shape, and perhaps consider it as a place to live. I've already thought about that, I nodded. Robin said she could take me there tomorrow. Great, Weber approved. One more thing. Don't have any direct contact with the son or his wife until the legal procedures are finalized. Any communication must go through me or Miss Thorne. As Robin and I walked out of the office, I felt strangely relieved, as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying for years had suddenly become lighter. How are you feeling? Robin asked as we got into her car. It's weird, I admitted. Part of me still couldn't believe that my own son had done this to me. But the other part feels stronger than it ever had in years. Robin smiled. That's because you're finally taking control of your life. Chester would be proud. Yeah, I nodded, looking out the window at the city floating by. I think he'd be proud. The next day we left for Santa Barbara. The trip took about 3 hours, and Robin and I spent most of it reminiscing about the past. Our high school years, our first dates, our weddings. There was something therapeutic about these memories, as if they were helping me reconnect with the woman I once was. Strong, independent, hopeful. Do you remember the first time Chester and I invited you and Howard to dinner at our new house? I asked, smiling at the memory. I bet you do, Robin laughed. Chester was so proud of every corner, every board he'd laid. And you set the table so well that Howard still remembers your apple pie. It was a happy evening, I nodded. One of many. There will be others, Evie, Robin said softly. Other happy nights. In a new house, with real friends. We pulled up to the address on the deed, and I held my breath. The house turned out to be more than just a house. It was a beautiful Mediterranean-style villa perched on a hill overlooking the ocean. White walls, terracotta roof, large windows letting in the sunlight, and a manicured garden all around. Chester bought this? I couldn't believe my eyes. How could he afford it? According to the deeds, the house wasn't in very good condition, Robin explained. Chester probably saw potential in it that others didn't see. Typical of him, wasn't it? I nodded, remembering how Chester was always able to see the value in things that others had written off. He was like that with people, like that with houses, like that with everything his hands touched. We were greeted at the front door by an older man with a friendly smile. Mrs. Packard? He asked. I'm Thomas Higgins, the property manager. Mr. Weber let me know you were coming. He led us inside and I couldn't contain my admiration. The house was spacious and bright, with high ceilings and an open floor plan. The view of the Pacific Ocean through the large windows was breathtaking. Mr. Packard hired me about 20 years ago to keep an eye on the house, Higgins explained as he showed us the rooms. He'd come by every few months to check on things, and sometimes he'd stay for a weekend to fix or improve things. He didn't tell me anything about it, I said quietly. Ha, he explained that it was supposed to be a surprise, Higgins smiled. For my Evie, he said. He loved you very much, Mrs. Packard. I felt a lump come up to my throat. Chester had created this place for me, worked on it for years without ever saying a word. It wasn't just a financial safety cushion, it was a gift of love. The house is fully furnished and ready to live in, Higgins continued. Mr. Packard updated all the plumbing and electrics 5 years ago. The garden is serviced weekly. There is also a contract with a cleaning company that comes twice a month. We walked around the house, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen and living room, a study with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and even a small workshop in the basement where Chester apparently worked on his projects. In the workshop, I noticed a picture on the wall of Chester and me on our wedding day. Next to it was another, little Lawrence on his father's shoulders, and a few more pictures of our family over the years. He missed you when he was here, Higgins said quietly. He talked about it often, about how one day you'd live here together. I ran my fingers over the photos, feeling the tears run down my cheeks. Chester never lived to see the day we could be here together. But he left me this house, this gift, so I could start a new life. Thank you, Mr. Higgins, I finally said, for taking care of the house all these years and for keeping those memories alive. Higgins nodded with understanding. It was an honor to work with Mr. Packard. He was a very special man. And he pulled a bunch of keys from his pocket. He asked me to give you this when the time came. I took the keys to the house that was now mine, the house that Chester had created for us, knowing that he might never live in it himself. By the time Robin and I stepped out onto the terrace, the sun was already setting, painting the ocean golden and pink. I took a deep breath of the salty sea air and felt strangely calm. Are you staying here? Robin asked. Or are you coming back to San Diego with me? I looked at the house, at the ocean, at the sky slowly darkening over the horizon. I'll stay, I said firmly. This is my home. Chester wanted me to live here, and I would. Robin hugged me. I'm happy for you, Evie. I really am. After she left, I sat on the terrace with a cup of tea, watching the last rays of the sun disappear over the horizon. For the first time in a long time, I felt at home, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as the mistress of my own life and my own space. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. It was Alistair Weber. Mrs. Packard, his voice sounded excited. The letter was delivered to your son and his wife this afternoon, and I have some news. I straightened up, clutching the receiver tighter. What news, Mr. Weber? We've received a response from the bank regarding alleged attempts to access your son's accounts. Like you said, it was a forgery. Can you prove it? I asked, feeling my heart start to beat faster. Absolutely, Weber replied confidently. The attempts were made from your son's home computer at a time when, according to the supermarket's surveillance footage, you were shopping. There's no way you could have done that. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of anger and relief wash over me at the same time. What does this mean for our case? It seriously strengthens our case, Weber explained. We now have evidence not only of financial mismanagement on their part, but also of an attempt to slander you. This could lead to additional charges. Okay, I said firmly. What's next? We're waiting for their response to the letter. They have 5 days. If they don't respond or refuse to admit wrongdoing, we file suit. And, Mrs. Packard, he paused, given this new evidence, I'd recommend filing a police report for libel and fraud as well. I took a deep breath. Filing a police report on my own son, it was a step that was hard to even imagine even a week ago. But now, sitting in the house Chester had secretly prepared for me, knowing the betrayal that would come, I felt only determination. Do as you see fit, Mr. Weber, I said at last. I trust your professional judgment. Very well, Mrs. Packard. I will contact you tomorrow with further updates. After the conversation, I sat on the terrace for a long time looking at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there among those stars was Chester, the man who loved me enough to protect me even after his death, a man who foresaw his own son's betrayal and prepared for it. Thank you, Chester, I whispered into the night, for everything and for teaching me how to be strong, even when I forgot how to do it. In that moment, in the quiet night on the terrace of the house that was my new beginning, I realized that I am no longer a victim of circumstance. I am a woman ready to fight for justice. And that fight was just beginning. A week in the new house flew by. I gradually settled in, familiarized myself with the neighborhood, and allowed myself to enjoy a peace I hadn't felt in years. Every morning I woke up to the sound of the ocean, ate breakfast on the terrace looking out at the vast blue, and slowly rediscovered what it was to be the master of my own life. Thomas Higgins, the manager, came by every day to make sure I had everything I needed. He introduced me to my neighbors, an elderly Eldridge couple on the left and the Cornish family on the right. They welcomed me warmly without asking too many questions about why I was suddenly showing up at a house that had been empty for years. On Wednesday morning, Alistair Weber called. Mrs. Packard, he sounded cheerful. I have news for you. Good news, I hope. I walked out onto the terrace with the phone to my ear. Very good. Our official letter has received, shall we say, a strong reaction. In what way? Your son has called my office 6 times in the last 2 days. Weber didn't hide the satisfaction in his voice. Demanding a meeting, then threatening a lawsuit, then offering a compromise, and finally just begging to know where you were. I felt something inside me clench. Not from pity, that feeling was gone, but from the realization that Lawrence finally understood the gravity of the situation. What did you say to him? That you and I had an agreement, that all communications must go through me, and that your location was confidential. I nodded, even though Weber couldn't see it. What about the eviction notice? It was delivered yesterday, Weber replied. They have 30 days to vacate the house in accordance with the court order. As I expected, the judge fully supported our lawsuit. The life tenancy agreement was violated in the most egregious way. And the criminal case? I asked, feeling my heart beating faster. Charging my own son with a felony still seemed surreal, even though I knew he deserved it. The prosecutor is reviewing the case. Weber became more serious. Given the evidence of financial fraud and falsified attempts to access accounts, they have plenty of grounds for charges. But there is good news for you personally. The bank has agreed to reimburse all of the stolen funds once the investigation is complete. That was good news indeed, although it wasn't so much about the money as it was about the principle. Thank you, Mr. Weber. You've done a wonderful job. It's not over yet, Mrs. Packard, he said, a touch of excitement in his voice. Some interesting details have come to light during the investigation. Your son's bank statements show a series of large transfers to a company called Coastal Investments. That company is owned by a man named Finch Wolf. Nora's brother, I said quietly. Exactly. And according to the documents we've been able to get, Coastal Investments is a shell company set up to launder money from gambling. I shook my head. I'd always known Nora's brother had a gambling problem, but I hadn't realized it was this serious. Did my money go there too? Unfortunately, yes, Weber confirmed. But that's not all. We found a draft document on your son's computer that shows plans to take custody of you under the pretext of mental illness, which would give them complete control over all your finances, including your pension. I remembered their bizarre behavior that morning when they tried to get me to stay and then accused me of trying to hack into Lawrence's accounts. Everything fell into place. They'd been planning this for a long time, hadn't they? I asked, feeling a cold rage rising inside. Judging from the date of the document, about 6 months, Weber answered, right around the time the systematic withdrawals from your account began. I took a deep breath, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal. 6 months they'd been planning to declare me incompetent, lock me up in an institution, and embezzle my money. What now? I asked, surprised at my own calm. Now we wait. They must vacate the house within 30 days. In the meantime, I recommend you keep your distance. Don't answer any of their calls or messages. As if to confirm his words, my phone vibrated, showing an incoming call from Lawrence. He's calling right now, I told Weber. Don't answer it, he advised firmly. No good will come of this conversation. If he had something to say, let him talk through me. I took his advice and rejected the call. A minute later, the phone vibrated again with a message. Mom, please pick up. We need to talk. This is some kind of misunderstanding. We never meant to hurt you. I showed the message to Weber, reading it aloud. Classic tactic, he commented. First denial, then trying to make it look like a misunderstanding. The next step is either anger or pleas for forgiveness. Don't fall for either. That evening, Robin called. Evie, you're not gonna believe this. Your son came to my office. Her voice sounded excited. What? Why? I was surprised, although it made sense if you thought about it, to seek me out at my best friend's place. Trying to find out where you were. He was very polite at first, saying it was a misunderstanding, that he was worried about you. When I told him I couldn't give out such information, he started raising his voice, demanding. In the end, I had to call security. Security? I couldn't imagine Lawrence being so aggressive. He's not the boy we knew, Evie. Robin's voice turned serious. There was something, almost desperate in his behavior, like he was cornered. I guess he is, I said thoughtfully. Weber said they were involved in money laundering through Nora's brother's shell company. That explains a lot, Robin sighed. Either way, be careful. I don't think Lawrence is really dangerous, but cornered people can do desperate things. The next morning, Thomas Higgins brought the newspaper and fresh buns, a ritual we'd established from my first day in the house. There's news, Mrs. Packard, he said, setting the breakfast table on the terrace. Chadueño, last night some man was asking about you at the corner store. Showed your picture. I tensed up. What did he look like? Average height, dark hair, a little nervous. Said he was your son and that you were missing. Lawrence. Somehow he figured out I was in Santa Barbara. No one told him anything? I asked anxiously. No, not at all, Higgins replied confidently. Privacy is respected here. Besides, you're not some missing old lady, but a respected new member of the community. He smiled. I've alerted the neighbors and local merchants. No one will give away your whereabouts. I nodded gratefully, but the anxiety wouldn't let go. If Lawrence knew I was in Santa Barbara, then he might know my exact address. Later that afternoon, I told Weber about it. Don't worry, Mrs. Packard, he assured me. I've already filed for a protective order. If your son tries to approach you, he'll be arrested for violating the injunction. 2 days later, returning from a walk on the beach, I found a bouquet of flowers and an envelope on my doorstep. Inside was a card that read, Mom, please let's talk. I'm sorry about what happened. Lawrence, I showed the card to Higgins, who came by to see if everything was okay. How did he get the address? I asked, feeling the anxiety returning. I don't know, Higgins frowned. But I'll notify the local police. If you have a protective order, they need to know someone is violating your privacy. That evening of the same day, I received a strange phone call. The number was unidentifiable, and I answered, thinking it might be Weber from a new phone. Evie, Nora's voice sounded unusually soft, almost pleading. Please don't hang up. I was so surprised that I actually didn't hang up. "What do you want, Nora?" "To talk," she answered. "I know you think I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But Lawrence, he doesn't deserve to go to jail. It's all my fault." "An interesting change," I said coldly. "I used to be a crazy old woman, and now you're taking the blame?" "I deserve your contempt," her voice trembled. "But please think of Lawrence. He's a weak man who succumbed to my influence. All these financial frauds were my idea. He just wanted to please me. And throwing me out of the house was your idea too?" I asked, feeling the anger boiling up inside me. "Yes," she answered quietly. "And to make him believe you were trying to hack into his accounts. And so much more. I've manipulated him for years. But he's your son, Evie. Don't punish him for my sins." "You're trying to pity me, Nora." I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. "But the time for pity is over. Lawrence is a grown man who has made his own choices. He could have stopped you, could have sided with me, but he chose to betray his own mother for you and your machinations. He loves you," she said, a note of desperation in her voice. "Every day since you left, he's lived like hell. He doesn't sleep, barely eats, talks about how he's failed you. And yet he only sought me out after he received an eviction notice and possible criminal prosecution," I remarked. "That's a strange way of showing affection, don't you think?" Nora was silent, apparently not knowing what to say. "What do you want, Nora?" I asked her bluntly. "Do you want me to drop the charges? Give you the house?" "What?" We just want to talk." She sounded less sure. "Maybe find some kind of compromise." "Compromise?" I grinned bitterly. "What kind of compromise could there be after you tried to declare me crazy and steal my money? After you threw me outside in the rain?" "No, Nora, no compromise. You and Lawrence will get what you deserve." The next day, Weber reported that Lawrence and Nora had received official notice of the charges against them. They were to appear in court in 2 weeks. The morning I was about to leave for court to testify, Robin called. "Evie, I just saw the news. Lawrence and Nora have left the country." "What?" I couldn't believe my ears. A neighbor called the police when she saw them loading their suitcases into a cab in the middle of the night. The police arrived, but it was too late. They'd already left. Their cell phones were disconnected. I sat up, feeling my legs suddenly feel woozy. "They ran away," I mumbled. "Just gone." Weber confirmed the information. "The police are looking for them, but they've probably already left the country. Probably through Mexico." "What happens now?" I asked, still trying to make sense of what had happened. "From a legal point of view, it only makes their situation worse," Weber explained. "Fleeing from justice is a serious offense. If they're caught, they'll face much harsher penalties. But from a practical point of view, it means that the trial is postponed indefinitely." "And the house?" I asked, thinking about the place where I'd spent most of my life. "The house is still subject to return to you," Weber replied confidently. "Their flight has no bearing on the civil suit for breach of the life tenancy agreement. In fact, their absence from the hearing will only speed up the process in your favor." 3 days after Lawrence and Nora disappeared, the court officially ordered the Huntington Beach house back into my possession. The police searched the house and found numerous documents proving their financial fraud. Not just with me, but with other people as well. They were committing real estate fraud through Nora's travel agency, Detective Riley explained when I arrived to inspect the house, offering clients to invest in properties that didn't exist. Your money was only a small part of their scheme. I walked around the house that had once been mine and then had become a place of my humiliation and pain. Strangely, I felt no attachment to it. Everything that connected me to these walls and the memories of Chester now lived in me, not in this place. "Are you planning on coming back here?" "Ha ha," Weber asked, watching as I slowly made my way around the rooms. "No," I answered firmly. "This house is the past. My present and future are now in Santa Barbara." "What do you want to do with it?" I thought for a moment. "Sell it, and the money. Donate the money to help the elderly who are victims of financial domestic violence." Weber smiled. "A worthy decision, Mrs. Packard. I'll help organize the sale." A week later, news came from the police. Lawrence and Nora had been found in a small town on the coast of Mexico. The local authorities had arrested them and were preparing to extradite them to the United States. How do you feel knowing they've been caught? Robin asked me as we ate dinner at my house in Santa Barbara. I wondered, staring at the sunset over the ocean. Relief, I finally said. Not revenge or gloating. Just justice had been served. They'd made a choice, and now they had to take responsibility for it. Will you communicate with them when they are returned? I shook my head slowly. No, that chapter of my life is closed. I don't want to see them or hear from them anymore. My son died to me the day he threw me out on the street. The man coming back in handcuffs now is a stranger. Robin nodded understandingly and squeezed my hand. Chester would be proud of you, she said quietly. The way you handled all of this. I smiled as I watched the last rays of the sun disappear over the horizon. He knew I could handle it. That's why he prepared all this. I circled the house and the garden. He believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. That evening, sitting on the terrace after Robin left, I felt a strange calm. My son's betrayal was still a painful wound that might never fully heal. But now I had a new life, a new home, and, most importantly, a newfound faith in myself. Chester had protected me with his foresight, but ultimately it was I myself who found the strength to fight for justice. Lawrence and Nora had gotten what they deserved for their betrayal. But my victory wasn't in their punishment. It was in freeing myself from a toxic relationship and starting a new chapter of my life. Sunlight flooded the terrace as I took out my cup of coffee and settled into a wicker chair overlooking the ocean. It had been 3 months since my world had turned upside down. First crumbling after my son's betrayal, and then reborn in this beautiful place I didn't even know I had. The house in Santa Barbara that Chester had secretly bought for us 20 years ago had become my real home. Every day I discovered something new about it. Hidden details that my husband had thought of with love and care. The shelves just right for my height. The pantry organized the way I'd always preferred. Even the location of the outlets in the kitchen, exactly where I wanted them. He really knew you, Thomas Higgins remarked when I showed him the little things. He said he was building a house for a woman who liked morning coffee overlooking the ocean and evening reading under a desk lamp. I smiled, remembering those words. Chester had always noticed the details of my habits, even the ones I hadn't thought of myself. He had created a sanctuary here, where every corner breathed care and foresight. As I thought about this, I watched the seagulls soaring over the water. Their freedom and lightness now resonated within me. After years of living in the shadows, after humiliation and neglect in my own home, I finally felt free. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Robin's name popped up on the screen. "Good morning, sleepyhead," I greeted my friend. "Are you coming in today?" "I'm on my way," she said cheerfully. "We'll be with Howard in about an hour. Are you sure we won't interfere with your routine?" "Are you kidding? I'm looking forward to seeing you." Thomas had already prepared the guest room. Robin and Howard were my first guests in my new home. The idea that I could invite friends over without asking anyone's permission was still a strange feeling of novelty and mild surprise. After talking to Robin, I decided to take a walk on the beach. It had become my daily ritual to greet the morning by the water, to feel the sand beneath my feet, to watch the color of the ocean change with the light and weather. I took my old watercolors from my home in Huntington Beach and now occasionally painted seascapes, a hobby I gave up after Chester's death. Huntington Beach. Strangely, I hardly ever thought of the old house. After Lawrence and Nora were extradited from Mexico and charged with financial fraud, the court finally recognized my rights to the house. I decided to sell it with no desire to go back there. "Too many painful memories," I explained to Weber when he asked about my decision. "I understand," he nodded. "What about your personal belongings there?" "I'll take the pictures and a few memorabilia," I answered. "The rest could be sold with the house or given to charity." I didn't want anything that reminded me of the years I'd spent under the same roof with people who planned to declare me crazy to get my money, of the years when I was just a shadow, slipping quietly to the periphery of their lives, enduring the neglect and gradual erasure of my presence. Water enveloped my feet as I walked along the edge of the surf. Cool and refreshing, it washed away the last vestiges of bitterness that still occasionally awoke in me. The trial of Lawrence and Nora continued, and Weber kept me regularly informed of its progress. I declined to attend in person, submitting an affidavit. Seeing my son in the courtroom, watching him being let out in handcuffs would be too much even now. The anger I'd felt in the first weeks after the betrayal gradually gave way to a strange calm. I didn't forgive them. That would have been impossible, given the magnitude and cold-bloodedness of their betrayal. But I didn't want them to suffer anymore. I just wanted them out of my life forever. But Lawrence never gave up trying to contact me. Letters came every week, first apologizing and pleading for forgiveness, then accusing and rebuking, and then apologizing again. The classic cycle of the abuser, as explained to me by the therapist I started seeing on Robin's recommendation. This is typical of toxic relationships, Dr. Lynn said in our second session. First they hurt, then they apologize, then they blame you for their problems, and then the cycle starts all over again. I put those emails in a separate folder without reading them. Maybe someday, when the pain finally subsides, I'll want to know what he wrote. Or maybe I just throw them all away without opening them. The phone calls were even worse. Despite changing his number, Lawrence somehow found ways to reach me. I never answered, but the mere appearance of his name on the screen caused anxiety and tension. You could file a harassment report, Weber suggested when I told him about it. Prison rules forbid inmates from disturbing their victims. But I declined. Another trial, another round of conflict. It would be a continuation of the bond I sought to break. When I returned from my walk, I found Thomas preparing the terrace for the guests. He was arranging chairs and setting the table for brunch. "How was the walk, Mrs. Packard?" He smiled. "Fine, as always," I replied as I helped him arrange the napkins. "Thomas, I think I'm finally starting to feel truly at home." He nodded understandingly. "Mr. Packard always said that one day you would bloom here. He compared you to a rare flower that needs special soil and light." I smiled, imagining Chester saying that while working on the house. My love for him hadn't diminished over time, but it had changed, deeper, calmer, into gratitude for all he'd done for me, even though he knew he'd never see the results of his labors. Robin and Howard arrived right on time, bringing with them sea breezes and ringing laughter. Howard, a tall professor of literature with kind eyes and a gray beard, hugged me so tightly that I almost choked. "Evie, you look beautiful," he exclaimed, pulling away. "Santa Barbara has been good for you." "Freedom is good for me," I corrected, smiling, "and the absence of toxic people in my life." We sat on the terrace overlooking the ocean, enjoying brunch and conversation. We talked about everything. Books we've been reading lately, new restaurants in town, how Howard plans to partially retire next year. "What do you do all day in this corner of paradise?" Robin asked, spreading jam on toast. "Drawing," I replied. "Reading. Walking on the beach. I've met my neighbors, the Eldridges on the left and the Cornishes on the right. We have occasional board game nights. And I've also signed up for a pottery class at the local senior center." "Pottery?" Howard wondered. "You never mentioned that interest before." "That's because it didn't exist," I smiled. "It's something completely new. I decided it was time to try things I had always been curious about, but never had the chance to explore." After breakfast, I showed them the house and garden. Robin admired every detail, and Howard especially appreciated the library that Chester had set up in one of the rooms. "He remembered that you liked to read by the window," Robin remarked, looking at the cozy bay window with its cushioned armchair and floor lamp. "He remembered everything," I replied quietly. "Sometimes I think he knew me better than I knew myself." Later, as the sun began to set, we sat on the beach, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. Howard went to get drinks, leaving Robin and I alone. "How are you really doing?" she asked when it was just the two of us, unadorned and socially smiling. I thought for a moment, looking out at the ocean. "Yeah, healing," I finally answered. "There are days when I wake up and don't immediately remember the nightmare. There are moments of pure, unadulterated joy when I'm painting a sunset or molding a crooked cup in pottery class." I smiled. "And then there are moments when the pain returns, when I remember that my only child betrayed me so cruelly that I can no longer call him son." Robin put her hand on my shoulder. "It's okay, Evie. Losing a child, even in this way, is always traumatic. You don't have to forgive or forget." I haven't forgiven," I said firmly. "And I never will, but I'm learning to live with it." "And you're doing a great job." Robin squeezed my hand. Chester would be so proud to see you now. That evening, after dinner, when Robin and Howard were settled in the guest room, I went out on the terrace, enjoying the silence and the night air. The stars shone brightly over the ocean, and a light breeze brought the salty smell of the sea. I thought about how my life had changed over the past few months, about how I had gone from an intimidating, quiet woman trying to take up as little space as possible in my own home to a person who was building a new life on her own terms. The therapist called it coming back to myself, the process where a person who has lived in a toxic relationship for a long time rediscovers their true self, their wants, needs, and boundaries. You are reacquainting yourself, Dr. Lynn said at our last session. And from the looks of it, you like the person you are rediscovering. She was right. I did like the new Evie. Determined, calm, open to new experiences. A woman who was no longer afraid to take up space, to speak her mind, to assert her boundaries. My phone vibrated, interrupting my musings. I glanced at the screen, an unfamiliar number, but my gut told me it was Lawrence. He often used new numbers, trying to bypass my blocking. Such calls used to make me anxious and tense. Now I simply rejected the call and blacklisted the number, a mechanical action that evoked almost no emotion. A minute later, the phone vibrated again, a message from the same number. "Mom, please answer. The court is sentencing tomorrow. I can't go through this without your support." I read the message twice, then deleted it. No anger, no pain, just a quiet determination to protect the new life I've built. Tomorrow, Lawrence and Nora would receive their sentence. Weber had already warned me that it would likely be 3 to 5 years in prison, given all the charges. I didn't feel any satisfaction at the thought of my son going to prison, but I also didn't feel the need to protect him from the consequences of his own actions. In the morning, over breakfast with Robin and Howard, I told them about the impending sentence. "Will you be following the news?" Robin asked cautiously. I shook my head. "No. Weber will let me know the outcome if I want to know. But honestly, I don't care if he gets 3 years or 5. I just want this chapter of my life to be finally closed." After breakfast, we headed to the local farmer's market, a weekly ritual I've grown to love over the past few months. Brightly colored fruits and vegetables, fragrant spices, homemade jams, and baked goods all created an atmosphere of simple, uncomplicated joy. As I passed the pottery counter, I stopped to admire the work of a local potter. Exquisite vases and cups with ocean-colored glazes. "They're beautiful," I said to the master, an older woman with kind eyes and wrinkled hands. "Thank you," she smiled. "I've been making pottery for 40 years, but I'm still learning." "I'm just getting started," I admitted. "I'm taking classes at the senior center." "Oh, you must be at Martha's," the woman cheered up. "She's a wonderful teacher. I'm Eleanor, by the way." "Evie," I held out my hand. "And yes, Martha really is a wonderful teacher, though my first attempts are more like children's crafts." Eleanor laughed. "Everyone starts out that way. The important thing is to enjoy the process." She looked at me carefully. "You're new to Santa Barbara, aren't you?" "Yes, I moved a few months ago," I confirmed. "My friends and I get together once a week for an extra class at my studio," Eleanor said. "It's a small group, mostly older people like us." She winked. "If you'd like to join, I'd be happy to." I felt a smile spread across my face. Another door was opening in my new life, another opportunity for growth and fellowship. "Would be my pleasure," I replied, accepting the card she held out. As Robin, Howard, and I were walking back from the market, my phone rang. This time it was Weber. "Good morning, Mrs. Packard." His voice sounded official, as always. "The verdict's in. Would you like to know the details?" I hesitated. "Do I want to?" "Yes," I finally answered, "but just the basic information." Lawrence Packard was sentenced to 4 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2 years. Nora Packard received 3.5 years. Both must pay substantial fines and victim compensation. I closed my eyes, trying to feel something. Anger, satisfaction, sadness. But inside there was only fatigue and a slight relief that it was over. "Thank you, Mr. Weber," I said. "And thank you for everything you've done." "You're welcome, Mrs. Packard. If you need my help in the future, don't hesitate to reach out." After the conversation, I broke the news to Robin and Howard. They listened attentively without interrupting, and then Robin just hugged me without saying a word. "I'm fine," I assured her. really fine. And it was true. I felt like the heavy weight I'd been carrying for years was finally completely gone. Not because justice had been served and the traitors punished, but because I had finally let go of the past. In the evening, as the sun began to set, we had a small dinner on the terrace. Thomas cooked fresh seafood, Howard opened a bottle of wine, and Robin decorated the table with flowers from the market. To new beginnings, Howard raised his glass as we sat down at the table. And to the amazing woman who reminds us that it's never too late to start over. We clinked glasses and I felt a warm sense of gratitude spill inside of me. For these people, for this moment, for the opportunity to rewrite my history. After dinner, Robin and Howard went for a walk along the beach, and I stayed on the terrace, watching the last rays of sunlight color the sky in dramatic shades of orange and purple. Thomas was clearing the table, humming an old song to himself. "Thomas," I called out to him, "do you think Chester would be happy with the way things turned out?" He paused, thinking. "Mr. Packard has often said that he dreams of seeing you sitting on that terrace with a smile on your face, forgetting all your worries." He nodded toward the ocean. He envisioned you painting sunsets and hosting friends, enjoying the life you deserve. Thomas smiled. "So yes, Mrs. Packard, he did. I think he would be more than pleased." I nodded, feeling a lone tear roll down my cheek. Not from grief, from gratitude and light sadness for the man who loved me so deeply that he continued to care for me even after he was gone. In the distance, I could see the silhouettes of Robin and Howard walking hand in hand along the water's edge. The sun had almost disappeared over the horizon, leaving the last touches of light in the sky. They would be leaving tomorrow, but they promised to be back in a month. And in a week, I have my first class at Eleanor's studio. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Another text from an unfamiliar number. I didn't even bother to read it, just deleted it and blocked the sender. Whatever Lawrence's words were, they no longer had power over me. I am Evie Packard, a 67-year-old artist and aspiring potter. A woman learning to live life on her own terms, discovering new facets of herself every day. A widow, but not a victim. A mother who lost her son not to death, but to betrayal, but who found the strength to build a new life. And looking at the ocean stretching to the horizon, I knew that this new life was just beginning.